I came because of Tree Diversity Day, basically, primarily. Bioversity International is part of the CGIAR system, and the forest work at Bioversity International is part of the Forest, Trees, and Agroforestry research program of the CGIAR. Jointly with C4 and ECRAF, we put on an event for a full day called Tree Diversity Day. And so what we were hoping to accomplish with that was to really raise the awareness of the importance of trees, not only as elements of biodiversity themselves, and there are as many as 100,000 species of trees globally, but also for the biodiversity that they harbor, that they maintain. There are orders of magnitude more species associated with trees than the number of trees themselves. So it was really highlighting the importance of trees in the biodiversity context, and also the vital importance of trees for well-being of people.
Talking about your organization, tell us about some specific activities and initiatives that your organization has taken up.
Well, I think I'll talk about ones that I'm specifically involved in that have to do with trees. One that we're kind of excited about is a project that is aiming to develop a system to use DNA markers and stable isotope markers to be able to track logs that were illegally harvested. And so this is an approach to crack down, or to help to crack down on the illegal timber trade. At the moment, there are a lot of research projects around the world, but not connected. So what we're doing is bringing people together, developing a database for about 20 trees that are really important for the international trade and that are illegally logged, and that are also under some degree of threat. And this database with markers can be used to by accredited labs to track logs to ascertain whether they were actually from the location that the importer or exporter says they came from, and whether they are the right species. So at the moment there are about, well, it's estimated that as much as 70% of the international trade in tropical timber is from illegally logged sources. And this is a huge problem, obviously, for protected areas, from an ecological perspective, but also an economic perspective for countries that are losing the income that comes from a legitimate trade, and also at the society level, because people in small communities get caught up in this, and it's a criminal organization. So we feel that this is an area that's really important to get involved in. The time is ripe to bring it all together and make something happen. So that's one area where we're working. Another project that's quite different, although it involves illegal logging as well, is a project in the Niassa Reserve in northern Mozambique. And this is a very large wildlife reserve that is about the size of Denmark. It's very important for its Miambo woodland habitat, and for populations of large animals like elephants. But there are also a lot of people living there, and living in quite deep poverty. And they're carrying out activities, including illegal logging, that damages the forest habitat. And so we have worked on a project to understand how people use trees and how it could be done more sustainably. And we've focused specifically on honey harvesting and also the illegal logging.
Great. Interesting. I mean, especially intrigued by the first activity that you spoke about. How challenging does this get? Because the nexus of the entire illegal logging must be must be extensive. So does it involve coordinating with more than one department, let's say the government and other agencies? How does it typically work?
Well, what we're doing is really setting up a system that can be used by importing countries or by exporting companies or countries. The system will involve labs that are able to carry out the lab work, but what we want to get to a point where we have a high level of certainty for the tools to be able to say whether or not a log is legal. So it is complex, but I can give you one example of a situation where this kind of a system actually worked. In Germany, there was a shipment of mahogany that arrived. There are two species of mahogany from in Latin America that are logged, and where this shipment was coming from, only one of those species is legal. They said that it was that species, but people suspected that it was the other species, and they were able to prove with the DNA, with this forensic method, that it was actually the other species. And so this required someone at the customs office becoming suspicious, and then taking samples and shipping it to a lab at a university, actually, or I guess a national research institute in Germany, and they were able to prove that it was the endangered species. It was not the species that they had claimed, and so the company ended up with a big fine. And so that's how it can work. It's very new at this stage, but there is potential.
Well, it makes me think. A lot of illegal logging would say if it's taking place in an underdeveloped or developing country, where the logistics and the technology may not be available. DNA testing and tracking it down. So how challenging do you see, and what is the plan?
There are different approaches in terms of mapping the DNA. In general, it would not be a matter of taking DNA from every tree that's harvested. It would be sampling the area where the species is distributed and developing a map of genetic diversity with a number of different genetic markers, and doing the same kind of thing with stable isotopes. And then and the other side of it is having markers, having genetic sequences that are specific to each of the species of traded timber. And so if there is suspicion, then in any shipment, a sample, it would generally be, I think, when it arrives at its destination, that it would be checked. So there, it would be a matter of taking a small sample of wood, having the DNA extracted, also running it through the stable isotope testing if necessary, but with the DNA sample, the species can be determined, and the approximate location where it was harvested can probably be determined, depending on the specificity of the DNA markers. So then, what we're hoping is that this will become a deterrent for companies to buy wood that they're not sure is labeled correctly. It's about ensuring that the labeling is done correctly.